name's Kelly Hofforth, and I cannot tell you how thrilled I am to see all of your faces here with us tonight, everyone making the drive. Who thinks they came the farthest? Of course, Will and his bride came the farthest for sure, but locally, to come and see Will Tuttle speak tonight. How far did you come, Kim?
Oh no, you did. I came from Kalamazoo.
Kalamazoo, okay, that's pretty great. So, Michiana Veg Fest is what we're about. I'm one of the organizers, and we have been gifted a grant from Beacon Community Impact to take our show on the road, as it were. So we're not a one-year event, we are all-year event, and we are just super excited to kick this off. So, a couple of things, housekeeping things, please turn your cell phones off and be prepared to be engaged for an hour. And the restrooms are in the back to the left if you haven't found those already. We will be having some food and refreshments afterwards because I know I saw someone just trying to scarf down food as fast as you can because it's so good. You didn't want to stop, right? I get that. So we'll have more afterwards, and I just again want to thank you for coming out. And with that, I want to give one more shout out to A Bite With Me. So A Bite With Me, MEE. Catered our event tonight, and the food is all vegan. I mean, yeah, I know. I wish she were here. Well, she knows I love her, and her food's amazing, but I don't know that if a lot of you have even heard of her or had some of the things you ate tonight, but they were fabulous, and she does a great job. First Unitarian Church, isn't this just a beautiful venue? I hope we can have more time in this space with more speakers talking about plant-based living, and so thank you First Unitarian for your help, and as I mentioned, Beacon Community Impact, if it weren't for them granting us some funding for this, we couldn't do it. So without that anymore, I said thank you, and Catherine Perry is also co-chair of Michiana Veg Fest, and I will turn it over to Catherine. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for coming out. Well, it is my great pleasure, my honor, my joy to introduce Dr. Will Tuttle and his wife, Madeleine Tuttle, to you all. I've known Will and Madeleine since 2012. Actually, on September 9th, 2012, I went to Grand Rapids to hear Will Tuttle speak. Why did I go all that way? It's because I bought his book and I was reading it, and he really supported me so much on my journey toward plant-based living. So I'm very grateful, and I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Tuttle again. We had an event 3 years ago, also in September here, where Will Tuttle talked to and performed the piano. So let me just tell you a few words about Dr. Will Tuttle, who is really a force for healing in the world, as you will find out. He is the author of the international bestseller, The World Peace Diet, which has been published in 16 languages. He has lectured and performed widely throughout North America and worldwide, even China and Taiwan. His doctorate degree from the University of California, Berkeley, focused on educating intuition and altruism. He has taught college courses in creativity, comparative religion, and philosophy. A featured expert in Cowspiracy, the documentary, and other documentaries. He's a recipient of the prestigious Courage of Conscience Award, and he's also a former Zen monk and Dharma master in the Zen tradition. Author of Islands of Light and editor of Circles of Compassion, as well as Buddhism and Veganism. He has also created 10 CD albums of original piano music, some with his spouse Madeleine performing on the flute. Will Tuttle's presentation tonight will include his music and evocative animal and nature paintings by his wife Madeleine. She's a visionary artist from Switzerland who's also a flutist, a Waldorf teacher, an organic gardener, a vegan chef who does Google presentations on cooking. They're wonderful. And she's also an artisan. So if you're interested after the presentation, Will Tuttle and Madeleine have a table where they have their books and CDs of beautiful music, so you might be interested in giving them a look. So without more, let me just welcome Dr. Will Tuttle, who's going to talk about healing our world, a deeper look at food. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thanks so much, Catherine and Michiana Veg Fest people. And let's have a big hand for all these organizers, the Beacon Community Initiative and all that, and then the food. It's been great that you work so hard to help this happen. So thank you all for joining us. So so basically I'm going to speak for a few minutes here about healing our world, a deeper look at food, and also play this wonderful piano a little bit, and Madeline will be joining with me on the silver flute on a couple of pieces, because part of the way that we feel drawn to sharing this message is to emphasize the beauty of nature and really of animals and also of human beings. You know, I think that sometimes is covered over. We see so many documentaries about the devastation of nature and the killing of animals and the wars that we have with each other and all these things. And so we feel it's really important to celebrate the beauty and the compassion and the awareness that we have inherent within us, and to focus on that. And I think underlying message I have here today really is, from my point of view, a very positive message. The underlying message is like that food, right? It's delicious. And the message, the other, part of the message is negative in the sense that what I am going to be talking about is the devastating impact of animal agriculture. I think it's really important for us not to let that be not to be clear about that, because when we're clear about what animal agriculture actually does, if you had been born as cows and pigs and chickens, I would not have to explain this to you, right? Since we're born as the dominant species, and they're born into mutilations and killing, and we're eating them by the billions every year, we find that we don't really realize, I think, in our society the impact that animal agriculture has on our environment, on our society, and our health. And so I'm going to be talking about our health, our physical health, also our psychological health, and our spiritual health as well, because I think they're all interconnected. And more, even the mainstream medical model is realizing that we're not just a body, right? We are a being, and health is very complex. In order to be healthy and thrive, it's important. What we're eating is very important. This has been sort of not understood, and our food is really important. So I'm going to talk about the impact of our food on our health, but underlying that also is our attitudes and our emotions, and how when we wake up in the morning, if we have a feeling of, wow, I got another day to learn and to grow and to contribute to helping make a better world in whatever unique ways that I can do that, and that just brings enormous healing into our bodies, into our every cell of our being. And I emphasize in the World Peace Diet that eating animal foods has a real negative effect, not only on the animals, but on the people who have to kill the animals. Right? We have a whole armies of people who then stab animals. Other armies of people have to do other terrible things like sexually abuse the animals because they have to be impregnated on what the industry refers to as rape racks over and over again: cows, pigs, chickens, turkeys, all these animals. So there's a lot of sexual abuse that has to be performed on the animals, a lot of killing of the animals. So the workers have the highest rates of injury and drug addiction, alcoholism, spousal abuse, and trauma. It's called perpetrator-induced traumatic stress disorder. So when we're going through our regular day and we're taking out our wallet and we're paying for meat, dairy products and eggs, we're causing a lot of suffering to these animals, to the workers, to hungry people. It's well understood that we can basically feed about 10 or 11 billion people with the amount of food we're growing every year, but we have terrible hunger situation. We have 20, 30,000 people dying every day of starvation. And of course it's driven because most of the food we're growing we're feeding to these animals. So it's a very inefficient system that's not only causing an enormous amount of pollution and environmental devastation, cutting down of rainforests, burning of rainforests to grow genetically engineered corn and soy and other feed crops for these imprisoned animals, and factory farm fishing, which is 2/3 of the fish we're eating now are raised in factory farms, which are really toxic also. So all of these, this environmental devastation, the pollution, the toxins from the runoff, right? We have huge amounts of herbicides and pesticides and fungicides and chemical fertilizers, and all that concentrates in the flesh and secretions of these animals. So the underlying idea is that all these different types of health are interconnected. A healthy society, a healthy environment, a healthy body, a healthy mind, a healthy spirit, all of these are interconnected. And the more healthy our environment is, the more healthy our mind is, the more healthy our body is, that they all support each other. The worse, the more we attack our environment and pollute the air, pollute the water, suck the aquifers dry, cut down the rainforest, destabilize the climate, destroy the oceans, cause species to go extinct like we're doing now more than in 65 million years, that's going to hurt us too, right? We're all interconnected. The main teaching is to understand the interconnectedness of all expressions of life. So how can we expect to think that we can be healthy when we're destroying the web of life around us and causing misery and violence to all these animals? And then we're taught to eat that, right? We're taught to eat these foods which concentrate the various toxins. There's over 10,000 actually different drugs and hormones and antibiotics that have been approved to be administered to these animals. And they are also in their flesh and in their dairy products and eggs. There's all these toxic pesticide and herbicide residues, as well as the drug and hormone residues and antibiotic residues. So we're not really told about this. We have to kind of find out about it, like, coming to a Unitarian church and coming to something like this. I understand why, because my father owned a whole chain of newspapers. I was a kid, I was raised in this newspaper family, and I learned early on just sort of what you're not supposed to know, which is you will never see articles in the media that the advertisers will object to, because they'll just stop advertising. They'll say, heck with you, I'll advertise in the other newspapers. I learned this from my father growing up, that don't say anything that's going to upset the advertisers. And the biggest advertisers, who are they? It's a big fast food industry, the chemical industry, the pharmaceutical industry, the banks behind the scenes, making money on all this stuff. And so it's very important, I think, to educate ourselves and not depend on the mass media for our education, because very often we don't get the real truth about things. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 40 years, is trying to do research into the impact of animal agriculture. And I just have to tell you, the more I learn, and I've learned a lot, the worse I see it really is. I mean, it's really detrimental to us. And there's no like silver lining. There's no good thing about animal agriculture. I mean, there's nothing. It's just violence and toxicity all the way through. But the good news is, the silver lining actually is that we're realizing that. We're realizing that we can make the kind of food we have here, and we can feed everyone on a fraction of the land with a fraction of the toxicity and environmental impact, and actually much healthier food, right? So that's the great good news. And I'm an example, I have to say. I mean, I figured this out. I've been a vegan for 39 years, so back in 1980 I decided to try it, and before that I was a vegetarian. And it's been, I have to say, I'm get up every morning jumping up and down from happiness that I haven't had to actually go. I mean, I know this is somewhat supported by a medical facility. I haven't been to a doctor in like 45 years, so I've been out of the system, didn't have insurance or anything. I just now turned 66, so now I have Medicare. Well, I don't know what to do with it. But anyway, so I think it's not that if we're eating and for me it's important not just a plant-based diet, but also organic and also whole foods. As much as possible, a whole foods, organic, plant-based diet. You'll get used to it. It's delicious, and it's really a wonderful foundation for radiant health, not just for ourselves, but for our ecosystems, for our entire planet, for the animals, for wildlife, for future generations. If we really want to just be a loving, caring person, this is the way to go. If we just somehow evoke within ourselves a sense of caring for hungry people, for slaughterhouse workers, for future generations, and for animals and ecosystems and rivers and lakes and streams and oceans and all of that. And the good news is that as we exercise that kind of caring, it boomerangs back to us. If we're going to exercise, well, I don't care about that. I'm going to eat bacon, and we take out our wallet and we pay for suffering and misery and pollution and devastation. And then we end up, stabbing animals over and over again because of our decision. What happens? We end up on our back getting stabbed for a heart bypass, right? I mean, as you sow, so shall you reap. But whatever you put out, we sow osteoporosis in these animals, and we get osteoporosis. We sow obesity in these animals. They're sold by the pound. We have scientists working day and night to try to maximize the obesity of these animals. So we're sowing those seeds constantly, and what do we get? We get obesity, right? As you sow, so shall you reap. We sow cancer. These animals are full of cancer. They're eating toxic food. And what do we get? Cancer. What you do, it's going to come back. So if we will sow seeds of kindness and love and caring, we get radiant health and happiness. Not just physical health, but it's like, that's one of the things that's hard to describe, this sense of joy of just being alive. Because if I'm eating misery and terror all the time, I wake up, I'm not going to feel, and that's the thing, the pharmaceutical industry makes huge profits on medication for, not only for heart disease and diabetes and all that, but for depression and anxiety and those kinds of things. So, I don't want to give my money for that. I'd rather give it for, taking a walk. It doesn't cost anything to take a walk on the beach, really, but to do, something positive, because we're all here anyway, even if we're really healthy. We're here, maybe we get 9 decades, 10 decades, eat a lot of sprouts, really healthy, maybe 11 decades, 12 decades maybe, I don't know. But in any event, we're just here for a relatively short time. I think it's important to remember that. And so, for the time we're here, to be as we can an agent of healing, an agent of kindness and caring, and we will find our body cleans out. And there's so many levels to this. I mean, I only have a few minutes this evening to really talk about this. And the World Peace Diet we made it into an audiobook, and it's 13 and a half hours long. And so don't worry, I'd like to keep you here 13 and a half hours to tell you everything. But you can get the book or the audiobook. But there's a lot to learn. And even more to learn, there's even more to unlearn. We've all learned so many things that are completely erroneous. Like protein comes from animals, and all of that. So I'm going to try to unlearn you all that stuff in the few minutes I have. But before we do that, I just want to play a couple of pieces of music because I think when we just take a minute and just allow ourselves to tune in to our hearts, and that's one of the things that I think is beautiful about us as human beings. We have an intuition. We have an inner wisdom. All of us have an inner wisdom that we can learn to rely on. We don't have to only go to the experts and have them tell us what to do, because sometimes they don't know really very well. The more we can learn to trust this inner wisdom that we have to guide us in what we're eating and how we're living, I think we become more empowered and we can share ideas with each other. And so this music I'd like to share with you. I'm just going to play one piece, and then Madeline will play a couple of pieces with the piano and the flute. So this first piece will be a piece, I call it Dance for the Arctic Moon. I compose all my own music, and one of the main themes of the talk tonight is the power of the sacred feminine dimension of consciousness. The feminine, I have a chapter in the World Peace Diet about this, about the sacred feminine, and the ancient Greek tradition had a word called which was Sophia, and Sophia is the Greek word for wisdom, and it's decidedly feminine. And the idea is that there's a certain feminine wisdom within all of us, both men and women, I think especially within women, that yearns to love and protect and nurture life. It's this basic wisdom that the mother gives birth, and now, even though that little baby's just a lot of trouble, she says, all right, I'm going to do whatever it takes to love and protect and nurture you. And that wisdom to care, that really caring wisdom. And then we also have this capacity, but animal agriculture, the whole operation of animal agriculture is suppress Sophia. So we don't care about cows and pigs and chickens. We don't care about the rainforest. We don't care about hungry people. We just eat it. We just don't ask questions. Just do what we're told. Just follow orders. So Sophia is this rising up energy of caring. I care about the earth, I care about my children, I care about the hungry people and so forth. And so this is called Dance for the Arctic Moon. The moon, cross-culturally, is an archetype, represents the feminine wisdom and also actually represents spiritual awakening. And the north of the four directions is the direction of going within, the direction in the winter we are quiet and we listen. So this is Dance for the Arctic Moon. I'd like to just dedicate this music to the underlying theme, really, of this evening, which is healing our world and to creating a field of our consciousness, our human consciousness, for peace and for awareness and for harmony in the world. So please feel free to just let the music maybe evoke some imagery if you'd like, or take you on an inner journey, and then we'll hear a couple of pieces with Madeline. So enjoy. Thank you. you, and let's have a hand for Madeline. She'll be joining now on the silver flute. We'll play two pieces. The first one is a kind of a musical meditation on something that we see now and then from where we live. We have a house now in Northern California with a lake, and sometimes these white pelicans come in and they circle around and kind of soar together as a group. And it's so harmonious and beautiful to see how birds live together like that. So I'd like to invite you to enjoy this piece. We call it the White Pelican piece. And it's that image of the harmony of nature. Enjoy. Because I think this is a major misunderstanding. Because, I know when I was a little kid, I'll just say this very briefly, and I understand it now, the only reason I was eating meat and dairy products and eggs all those years that I did was because I was just following orders. I was just doing what I'd been told to do by very well-meaning, loving people. My mother, my father, my friends, my neighbors, my relatives, my doctor, my teachers, my minister, everybody. That was it. So I was, I'm raised in this tribe, and I eat the tribal food. That's what everybody eats. You can't not do it. You have to. Basically, I did. So I remember when I was about 7, I asked my mother, I said, Mom, the kind of food we're eating, is this what everybody eats? And my mother said, yeah, this is what everybody eats. Yeah. And then she left, but then she came back, and I still remember it. And all these years later, she said, actually, I'm sorry, that's not true. There are vegetarians. And I had never heard that word in my life, and I said, and actually I loved it, because I was at that age when I loved learning these new words, especially if they were kind of long. You're like, what's a vegetarian? That's like a big word. kind of excited. And she thought for a minute, she said, a vegetarian is, and she said, well, I wouldn't worry about it, you're never going to meet one. So I immediately understood that, number one, these vegetarians are very rare, because my mother, who I knew was very, very old, she had never even met one. And number two, she said they didn't get enough protein, so I could imagine these poor people without protein. They must be just, half dead, dragging themselves through the dirt, begging for protein. I was so glad I was not a vegetarian. That must be the worst thing. These poor people that are vegetarians. And my mother was right. I never heard the word again. I went on to go to the summer camp in Vermont, where I learned to catch my own chickens and hold them down and cut their head off and eat them. And we did the same thing for cows. And at the dairy, we had a dairy, and they wouldn't give enough milk, so we'd kill them. And so I actually participated in all this when I was 13, 14, 15 years old on these summer camps. And I had no problem, because I'd gone through 13 years at that point, or 14 years, of the most intense indoctrination possible. I knew that God gave us these animals to eat. They don't have a soul. They don't matter. They're inferior to us. And they taste good, and if you don't eat them, you're definitely going to die within 24 hours of a protein deficiency. This is how it's set up. You've got to do it. This is how it is. And so, like the dairy cows, they say, well, they're not giving enough milk, so we're going to use it for meat. This whole thing. So that's the main point I want to make, is that the only reason any one of us eats animal foods is because of the communities we're raised in. We're just following orders, doing what we've been told. So I, luckily, after graduating from college, I went out into the world, and I ended up living, by chance, ended up at a community called The Farm. This was back in 1975, and The Farm back in 1975 was in Tennessee. It was the largest hippie commune in the world, and it was basically 900 people, and they were all vegetarians. And they weren't dragging themselves through the mud. They were actually very energetic and creative people. They had about 200 children that were born on the farm, and they weren't just vegetarians. They were vegans, but no one heard of the word vegetarian in 1975, so all they could say was, well, we're vegetarians. But they didn't eat meat or dairy or eggs. And so these 200 little kids were born vegan, and they were thriving as little vegan kids, and the people were thriving. And so I said, why are you guys doing this? And they told me about the world hunger I mentioned earlier. They said, well, most of the food we're growing is being fed to animals while people are starving. And food shortages are the main driving cause of war, so we want to make a more peaceful world, so we're eating lower on the food chain, so just so there's enough for everyone to eat. And I said, what's the second reason? And they said, well, you know what the animals go through, and they explained to me a little bit of the terrible things that animals go through and how they're raised in imprisonment, hyper imprisonment, and mutilated, and all this terrible stuff. But the thing that was so good, positive, was that I was eating with them every day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, meals that were totally plant-based. So I was learning about tofu, right? I was learning about grains and beans and veggies. I mean, I already ate veggies, but I was learning that you don't need anything else. This is it. I mean, there's nothing missing. And so I went on. So that was it. I became a vegetarian that day. That guy told me that back in 1975. And then about 5 years later, in 1980, I learned a little bit more about the cruelty and abuse of cows and hens for eggs and for milk. So I became a vegan in 1980. And just to finish the story, about a few years later, I was really into meditation at that point. I really wanted to go deeper. So I ended up going to South Korea and becoming a Zen Buddhist monk. Shaved my head, wearing robes. We were meditating every day from 3 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock at night. Very intense. But I realized I was in this community where they had been practicing what we would call veganism for about 800 years. It was an ancient practice. And the idea was, if we want to be healthy spiritually and psychologically, and it also is and culturally, have healthy societies, we should treat others with kindness and respect. We should not harm others unnecessarily. And eating animal foods is harming others unnecessarily. It's harming animals, it's harming people, ecosystems, and so forth. So that kind of anchored at a deeper level. I realized there's a spiritual truth to this, a truth based on the interconnectedness of all life and of not causing suffering. And so I ended up going on getting my Ph.D. at Berkeley and really studying a lot of comparative religion and seeing how really all the world religions agree. There's this golden rule idea, right? Don't do to others what we wouldn't want to have done to ourselves. And the idea of whatever we sow, we will reap. If we keep sowing seeds of violence and disease in other beings, how can we think we're going to be healthy? If we keep enslaving them, how are we going to be free? So that has grown, and ended up with me writing this book and traveling and so forth. But the beautiful thing that we're seeing now is that there's a huge global, worldwide movement where people by the millions, really huge movement, moving away from eating animal foods, moving toward eating plant-based foods for ethical reasons, for health reasons, for environmental reasons, for spiritual reasons, and out of kindness, but also out of just caring about being healthy, myself. And I want to say, really, because something people say, well, that's kind of selfish, being healthy oneself, that's just only caring about oneself. I would rather care about other people or animals. But I want to say, first of all, that caring about my own health, that's a very compassionate thing to do. It's very kind and loving. When we care about our health and we're healthy, that's not only a great gift to us, that's a great gift to everybody in our world. It's a great gift. When we take care of our health, we bless everyone. So it's very kind and loving to do that. Because I've seen it before. I've seen it a lot. Like it's a couple, and maybe the woman, for example, I don't know, it could be either way, but she decides to go to a plant-based diet to be healthy, and her husband says, well, I like bacon, I'm just going to eat what I want to eat. So then she goes vegan, and she really gets healthy, and then he doesn't do it, and then he has a stroke. And then she has to take care of him for the next 10 years, and he doesn't even remember who she is. So it's really good if we're healthy. And it helps everyone around us, so it's a very compassionate thing to do. So it's very important for us to make an effort to understand nutrition. And that's what I want to talk about, not just, the nutrition on all dimensions. So let's look at the basic macronutrients that we need to be healthy, right? So the basic macronutrients that we need to be healthy are protein. And protein is one of the main things people say, well, where do you get your protein? If you're a vegetarian or a vegan. Vegetarian shouldn't ask if people are eating cheese, because that's a lot of protein. But for vegans, people say that, well, where do you get your protein? So it's very important to understand this basic idea, which is that all protein is made by plants, okay? All of the amino acids that make up all the proteins are all made by plants through photosynthesis. There's 20 amino acids. And our body manufactures a lot. We don't know exactly. Some estimates are around 8 to 10 million different proteins our body manufactures to do all kinds of different things. But every single one of those proteins is made out of amino acids, and our bodies combine amino acids to make all the different proteins. If we eat animal foods, we're eating large proteins typically because the cow or the pig or whatever has eaten these plants and then converted those amino acids and made whatever they needed. We eat the flesh or the secretions of those animals. We're getting these cumbersome, large protein molecules that when we digest them, it creates an ash. It creates a residue which is acidic. So there's a huge problem. Hospitals are being filled up with people because of the fact that people's bodies are too acidic from eating animal-based foods. This has become well known. Inflammation and acidification of our blood and our tissues is a direct result of eating diets that are high in animal-based foods, because the protein molecules are so large, and there's a lot of nitrogen and sulfur, basically, which makes these acids, nitric acid and sulfuric acid, which tend to cause osteoporosis, liver disease, kidney disease, all these, and many forms of cancer as well. So it's really important to just understand that the highest quality protein actually comes from plants. That's the easiest for us to use. And that there is plenty of protein in plants. People are not going to the hospital because of a protein deficiency. It's a very rare disease. It's called kwashiorkor. Do you have any friends that are in the hospital because they're having kwashiorkor? That's a protein deficiency? No. People are filling up the hospitals because of protein excess. Protein excess is a real problem. If we eat too much protein, our body has to metabolize it. We can't just not do something with it. It has to be metabolized, and the excess protein has to be excreted. It's hard on the kidneys. It's a big burden. So the whole idea is, don't eat so much protein. That whole this brainwashing of eating protein. Who's doing that? The pharmaceutical industry, the meat industry. They like people eating a lot of protein. They make a lot of money on all sick people. They don't make any money. They haven't made any money on me, right? In 50 years. They don't want anybody to know what I'm saying. I think it's great that the medical establishment is actually promoting me and saying this. In the long run, it's better though. In the long run, this health system is ridiculous. So it's better if we're healthy. So understand protein, okay? It's really important to understand that plant-based foods have protein. And beans have very high amounts of protein, right? They're anywhere from 12 to about 35% of calories are in protein in beans, right? Like lentils and soybeans and chickpeas and all. So there's a lot of protein in these. So if you're at all concerned, you can eat beans. But vegetables are very high in protein also. All the leafy greens are around 40 to 50% protein. I mean, even steak is only like 35 to 40% protein. So you can get plenty of protein from vegetables and beans, and then even grains have plenty of protein. Even potatoes have quite a bit of protein. The only thing that's pretty low in protein are fruits, but even fruits have an adequate supply. So if you're just eating fruits, vegetables, grains, and some beans, there's no way you're not going to get enough protein. It's never an issue. And so it's just helpful, I think, to be clear about this, and it's much more easily digestible protein. And we don't need to eat these manufactured foods. I think if you're transitioning from eating meat into a plant-based way of eating, then maybe you want to eat a Beyond Burger or one of these, kind of things. But in the long run, it's better to eat more of a whole food plant-based diet. So the next thing is fats, right? We have proteins, we have fats. Now, again, all the fats, all the oils and fats are all made by plants. Animals don't make any fats. The healthy omega-3s, omega-6s, omega-9s, all these different ones are all made by plants. Animals can concentrate them, and they tend to concentrate too many. So most people in our society are eating really too much fat. So that's one of the good things. When we move to a plant-based diet, we tend to start eating less fat, and that's one of the reasons people start losing weight naturally. I mean, this happens all the time. So, and they're much healthier fats, because in animal-based foods, they're saturated fats, basically, and so it's not a good thing for our heart, it's not a good thing for our cancer, and so forth. And then the other thing that's really important to understand is that animal-based foods do not have any fiber. Fiber is a critical nutrient. There's no way this is something that's kind of ignored in our society, but fiber is so important for digestion and for our blood circulation, for everything, because if you don't have fiber, the fat and everything goes in so fast. I've seen videos of what happens to our blood cells. Our arterial, our blood arteries and so forth. Without fiber, the fat and so forth goes in so quickly and starts clogging up. We start getting really messed up inside. So fiber for healthy digestion is critical. And the other thing that there isn't any of, which is absolutely essential for us, a critical nutrient, is complex carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are where we are built to thrive on carbohydrates. There are no carbohydrates in meat or eggs or dairy. I mean, a tiny bit in milk, but basically they're fat and protein. But if we eat that, the body goes, well, I hope they don't do that again, but I'll do my best, right? Our body's this wonderful, I don't like to call it a machine, it's like an intelligent being who does its best with whatever we eat. But if we keep, giving foods that are just make the body get acidic and inflammatory, it does its best, but pretty soon it's overcompensating and we get more and more sick and clogged up and so forth. So starch, I can't overemphasize starch. Healthy, complex carbohydrates, simple carbohydrates like white sugar, white flour, that's not healthy. But complex, like whole grains, beans, fruits, and veggies are all rich in starch, carrots and so forth, and potatoes and sweet potatoes. And these are the foundation for health. You can eat a lot of that, and you'll never gain weight. I mean, when I went to Korea way back in the early 80s, these people were eating basically lots and lots of rice and starch, and the time I was there, I never saw an overweight person. So, and our brains run on carbohydrates, complex carbohydrates. That's what they run. They run on glucose, right? Our brains run, our body, remember high school biochemistry? Glucose is what our bodies run on. Well, it's very difficult to convert protein or fat into glucose. It's easy to convert carbohydrates into glucose. That's, when you have carbohydrates, it burns to glucose and water. That's it. There's no other thing. As soon as you have protein or fat, it burns to, you have an acid coming. So in our brains, which are only 4% of our body weight, use about 35 to 40% of our energy, and it only runs on starch, on carbohydrates. So it's very important for us to stop this idea that carbohydrates are bad, and that they'll make you gain weight or something. They're really healthy. And then, so those are the macronutrients. There's also vitamins and minerals. And vitamins and minerals all come from plants. None of them come from animals. Don't think you need to go run a food through a middle animal to get it, right? Get it directly from the plants. Every mineral, all the minerals that we need, zinc, whatever you think of, iron, they're all manufactured by plants. So if we eat healthy organic plants, we'll get all the minerals that we need. And then the other is all the different vitamins. All the vitamins are manufactured by plants as well. There's only 2 exceptions. So the 2 exceptions are vitamin D, which is not in very many plants. It's in a little bit in certain mushrooms, but otherwise it's really something we're supposed to be getting. It's a hormone actually that comes when our skin interacts with the sun. So that's vitamin D. The other one is vitamin B12. You probably heard vitamin B12 is. So vitamin B12 is a vitamin that is manufactured by bacteria, and it's possible to not get enough vitamin B12. Most people if they have a vitamin B12 deficiency, it's because they're not actually processing. They're getting enough, but they're just not converting it properly. So, but it is important, I think, if we move to a totally plant-based way of eating, to maybe take a B12 supplement. So people ask me about that, and I think it's probably a good idea because it's made by bacteria. And what we do with our food system nowadays, in our water system, since we chlorinate the water, there's no B12 in the water anymore. And so we don't get it there, and we industrially wash all the vegetables, right? So there's really not any dirt. So you can take a B12 supplement, or you can go out and eat a little bit of dirt. Either way. Okay. Get some B12. And although the other thing that's good to be aware of too, which is now becoming more and more well understood, is what's something called the microbiome. Have you heard of the microbiome? This is this whole community. There's like trillions of cells. Like our body has cells that are sort of us, my fingers or whatever, but there's also even more cells that are like not me, that are living here, right? This huge community that digests our food. And if those cells die, we would die. I mean, we need bacteria and microorganisms living inside of us. So this is now becoming a huge new frontier. Just in the last few years, scientists have finally sort of stumbled upon. It's like, whoa, look at this. And again, this is even another reason to don't eat meat and dairy, because this microbiome thrives on starch. That's what it needs. It thrives on starch. To be healthy, the microorganisms, they need starch to grow and be healthy and to digest food. If we're eating meat and dairy products, the benevolent bacteria start to die, and these malevolent bacteria start taking over. And the acidification of our tissues is also not in our best interest. This acid, the acid that comes from animal foods, because if an animal dies, right, and there's a corpse out there, like a roadkill or whatever, as soon as a person dies or an animal dies, the corpse starts getting more and more acidic. That's the rotting of it makes it more acidic, and that acidification is actually a signal to all the bacteria in the area that, oh, come on, everybody, take this thing apart. Take this corpse apart. It's dying. So that's what happens. If we're eating a lot of meat and dairy, the bacteria think we're dying. So they're trying to take us apart. So the whole idea is, to try to avoid this acidification. And we have, antibiotics that are used in many ways. Maybe they're necessary, but they're used a lot. And they're used a lot in animal feed. There are huge amounts of antibiotics that are put into the feed to make them fatten, and make the animals fatten up. So this whole massive dousing of the population with antibiotics is very harmful. Also, glyphosate. You know about glyphosate? Glyphosate is Roundup. That's one of the active ingredients, glyphosate, and it's a broad-spectrum antibiotic. That's what it kills bacteria. So it's one of the main problems why people have some leaky gut and irritable bowel syndrome, all these things. It's not only the meat and dairy, but the fact of eating glyphosate, and it's very hard on our system. And the reason a lot of people are gluten intolerant, this gluten problem, it's not the gluten, it's the fact that the wheat is always sprayed with glyphosate. They don't tell you that. What they do is they grow the wheat, and then they discovered that even though it's not GMO, so they don't have to spray it with glyphosate like soy and corn and alfalfa, they spray with glyphosate the whole time, because they're genetically engineered to withstand it. But wheat isn't. But what they do is they spray the wheat with glyphosate right at the very end before they're going to harvest it. Because normally when they harvest wheat, they only get about, whatever it is, like 80% of the grain, because it matures at different rates. But if they spray it out with glyphosate, the wheat plants just go into complete shock, and they release all the wheat berries, and so when they harvest it, they get 100%, right? So it's just to make more money. They spray it all with glyphosate, and then we eat the glyphosate. And so people have all been, since this started about 15 years, 20 years ago, everybody has gluten intolerance. Oh, I can't eat wheat, I can't eat wheat. Yeah, it's not the wheat, it's the glyphosate. That's the problem. But nobody knows, so you've got to eat organic. That's why I keep saying organic, organic, organic. If we're not eating organic, we're eating glyphosate. And glyphosate's hard on our microbiome, and it makes our digestion not work well. And also the other thing is they've discovered, which is really important, is that there's a huge nerve, a very important nerve. It's called the vagus nerve. It goes right from here to our brain. And it's now understood to be responsible for our mood, if we're happy or if we're depressed. So if we have this microbiome of all these malevolent bacteria, and they're not getting enough to eat, we're setting all the people, and so the pharmaceutical industry, again, is making huge profits on depressed, unhappy, anxious people because of what's going on down here. So it's really important to just understand the basic thing here, because unfortunately, we don't hear about this, because there's no money in this, right? Unfortunately, I mean, it's great that this is being sponsored by, but I think to really understand, like I say, that having a healthy body and a healthy organism inside of us, and that goes along with having a healthy ecosystem, right? So the more we can, when we pay for our food, even though it's a little more expensive to pay for organic, we're not paying farmers to use pesticide, herbicides, and fungicides that are killing birds and fish and insects and bees. We want to have a healthy environment. So buy organic as much as we can, not only for our internal environment, but for the external environment. And as much as possible, a whole foods, plant-based diet, because all the nutrients we need to be healthy we can get from that way of eating. And so this is the basic thing. I mean, in the World Peace Diet, I have an enormous amount of other information which I could share with you about the history of this and the cultural effects and psychological effects and spiritual effects. But the underlying message is that we're designed to thrive on these foods. They're abundant. We can feed everyone. This is the really good thing. Is we can feed everyone on a fraction of the land. We don't have to have, I know it's like hard to imagine we lived in an RV for 17 years traveling all over North America, and I'm telling you, most of North America has been reduced to these vast monocrop fields that go forever of corn and soy. And it's not for us, it's for these poor imprisoned animals. You never see them. They're stuck away in these stinking sheds where they're eating this stuff. And huge amounts of sewage and nitrous oxide and methane, destroying our climate, destroying our water. It runs off into the ocean, causing huge dead zones. I mean, it's the worst possible system you can imagine, and it's unnecessary. So we could actually allow forests to come back. We could have habitat coming back. We could feed everyone on much less land. We'd all be much healthier. The economy would be healthy. We wouldn't have all these sick people. I mean, it's nothing but good, really, except for maybe a tiny elite that makes a lot of money on sick people and on war and on environmental devastation. But for 99.9% of the people, it's the best possible thing. So for us to realize that if we're eating animal foods, we're not actually being exploited. We're actually eating stuff that's going to make us sick and destroy our planet for our kids. And if we question it, we become part of a healing movement that's based on being a force for kindness and caring, and we get a healthy community in here, right? We get a healthy, happy community, and we'll start seeing that all the messages that come up from down here will be like, wow, another day, I'm so happy, woohoo! It's like we get this really positive internal environment, and that's so important, I think, and we start to feel better about ourselves, that we're doing the best we can to reduce hunger in the world and reduce environmental devastation, reduce misery and violence. So it's really the beautiful thing I think about it is that it's something personal that we can all do. We can bring our lives into alignment with our values, and then we can share these ideas with other people, and then we can help make communities of sanity. That's why I love the fact there's a Veg Fest here, right? We have this Veg Fest, so that's a community where we share ideas and delicious food, because actually the other thing is I'm really blessed to be married to this wonderful Madeline. I always say the smartest thing I ever did was, besides marrying Madeline, was going vegan. Because I get food, it gets better every day. I have to say that. I mean, I've been a vegan for 39 years, but the food is so good because when we eat it, we think, wow, it came from caring people. It's not causing suffering, and it's even more delicious. So our taste buds, maybe have to change, but it only takes about 21 days for our taste buds to completely change, actually, in any person. So it's a little bit of a learning, a lot of unlearning. but each one of us can help create community. So I think these kinds of lectures, any kind of vegan restaurants, or any way we can create online discussion groups, whatever we can do to help share these ideas, I think is one of the greatest gifts we can give to the world, give to our children, because we can make a positive change, and really to go to the roots, which is our food, which is our most intimate connection with our culture, with nature. When we're eating something, it becomes us, right? You would think we would be very careful what we're eating. So be careful, be aware, be mindful, be conscious, and choose love. Don't choose violence. Choose love and caring, and let that be the guide. And I'm telling you, it's a wonderful adventure of learning, and we see it happening. The planet is definitely changing in a very positive way. We travel all over the world, Africa, Middle East, Asia, everywhere, Europe, and North and South America, and there's more and more people are understanding. It's a huge benevolent revolution happening right now. So thanks for being part of it. Thank you very much.
Amen.
Thank you. I'll stop here, and I'll turn it over. Do I turn it over now to you, Madeline?
Yes.
Yeah, we have a few more minutes. We do have to leave pretty soon, but
I have a
Good.
question.
just a second. We'll get the questions.
Just a second. So I'd like to invite you to our website, worldpeacediet.com, and we have a lot more information there. We have videos of talks and interviews, and I have a lot of YouTubes. If you click on the video section about the intuitive cooking, and it's vegan, organic, whole food, from scratch, easy, delicious, what more? So please go there and get inspired. Also, I have a book on the table with my paintings. There are more than these 5, and they're numbered signed limited edition prints. And if you like to come by and look at them and bring maybe one home, that's a good thing too. And not last, I have here a couple of baskets, and we like to take a donation for the whole event. Isn't the food great? Yeah. All right. So for just the whole event, we really appreciate it, and it will be distributed as it should be. Yes. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Madeline. So yes, I'm happy to take some questions. Just want to check, how many of you have actually read The World Peace Diet? This is sort of the main book. So a few of you have, yay, okay. We do have copies of this, both as a regular book, as an audio book, goes more deeply in. Also, we have other books on intuition and so forth. You can read those. We also have a book, if you're interested with, if you play the piano or know someone who does, with 15 of my original pieces, plus 25 of Madeline's paintings in there. All right, so it is to not try to change them. To just try to change myself. I mean, how many people can I change in the world? One. Beginning myself. I can't, and if someone came up to me and wanted to change me, I'd have both fists up like I could try it, That's a healthy response. I mean, we don't want to go around trying to change people. That's kind of aggressive and kind of, even though we think we're right and it would be better for them, but still, the way to do it, I think, is to be loving and respectful and to just plant seeds. So even though we can't change people, we can plant seeds. Gandhi called it satyagraha. That's a word in Sanskrit that means truth, power. Just share our own truth. Say, instead of saying you should eat less meat, or don't point your finger. Just talk about myself. So what I found works really well is to say, gosh, I'm so glad that I realized that the only reason I was eating animal foods all those years that I did was because I was just following orders. And I realized they weren't in my best interest, so I'm not doing it anymore, and it's great. Then don't say anything more. That's all you have to say. Because when we say that, then we're speaking our own truth. That's truth power. We're not trying to change them. We're just saying, gosh, it's so great. I'm so happy. I realized I was just following orders, and it wasn't in my best interest, so I'm not doing it, and it's wonderful. And when we plant that seed, the neat thing is that person's own wisdom, compassion, awareness will begin to water the seed, and maybe they'll probably forget the conversation, but that little seed will start to grow, and pretty soon they'll think, I don't want to just follow orders and that aren't in my best interest. That's not a good idea. And they'll start being more open to it. So I think if we just plant seeds in a loving, respectful way, that's the way forward. I think our movement is learning that. We learn this and we want to shake everyone. I used to do that. I try to think, well, if I shake them long enough, they'll go vegan, right? It doesn't work. Everyone everyone's been wounded. We've all been wounded. We've all been forced to eat this way. It's not our choice. But if someone's wounded, you don't try to, hurt them. You try to be loving and help heal them. And so I think that's the attitude to have, is just plant seeds with love, share your own story, and then let go. It's a great saying in the Bhagavad Gita that, if you've heard of Bhagavad Gita, it's don't be attached to the fruit of your actions. We don't think, well, I'm going to change you. Just plant seeds and let go, and don't try to change anyone. And the irony is, if I try to change people, they never change. If I don't try to change them, well, they change all the time, So it's very funny how it works. Just don't try to change people. Just change ourselves. Just make it so we're living this. We're living a life of love. Because what we're talking about, what veganism is, and this whole thing, it's love. That's all it is. It's love. It's being loving to everybody else and myself. So we have to be loving. This is all about love. That's the essence of it. Okay, I think we only have time for one more. Go ahead. Yes.
Hi, I work with elementary age children,
Yes.
and I've learned a lot today. Thank you very much. You talked about inflammation and that kind of thing. Do you see a connection in the diet and like ADHD and all of that behavior?
Definitely. There's no question about it. It's really too bad, but it's true. And the government is unfortunately still, in many ways, promoting and subsidizing foods that are causing these problems. The additives and the chemicals, the preservatives, all these things, and eating the standard American diet is really, I have quite a bit in there in the World Peace Diet about this, how we're eating foods that children are very sensitive, and so all these chemicals have a big impact that concentrate in the foods. So the more they eat a plant-based, because there's a lot less chemicals in plant-based foods, and the hormones, all these hormones, I could go on and on, you shouldn't get me started. There's really a lot of toxins in animal foods, many more from the environment, from the animals themselves. They're creating, casein, for example, the main protein in milk. We don't have renin like calves have to break down casein. Even if we can handle the lactose, we can't handle casein, really. So like myself, I had an appendicitis, tonsillitis, all these inflammations and other things from animal-based foods. So, and then what it does to us psychologically, these animals are absolutely, just in misery. Kids are sensitive. So I think, and there's been a lot of studies that have been, not a lot, but a few studies done, but when they go into a school and they start feeding organic, healthy, plant-based foods, oh my gosh, the relationships between the children change, the relationship between the children and the teachers change. They don't need to check them for guns anymore. It's like they're peaceful. This is the path to peace, and it starts with the kids, and the kids would really appreciate knowing, because they're just eating what, the kids are sponges. They eat whatever the parents tell them, what we're eating, and they're being marketed to all the time. I gotta stop here. I'll go on forever, but it's a great question. Thank you all for your great questions.
Hello, I'm Karen Sommers, and I'm one of the co-chairs of Michiana Veg Fest. So first, I want to thank you all for coming out tonight and listening to Will and Madeline. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom in a very inspiring, beautiful way, with your amazing music and the beautiful art that we have here. I also want to thank the leadership of the church. You have a beautiful facility. It was a great pleasure to work with you. And last but not least, we do have a survey that we're getting ready to distribute, and we would greatly appreciate it if you would complete that survey. It helps us determine next steps. It also helps us if this was an effective way to meet with you and educate and share. So again, thank you very much for coming, and have a beautiful, loving evening.
Thank you, Will.
And Madeline and I'll be at the table. I'm happy to answer any more questions, sign any books, and so forth. Thank you very much.